Hey, what is up guys? Welcome back to another video. Today we're going to be doing something a bit different. Today we are doing an in defense of video, so we're actually going to be bringing back some more in defense of videos again. I was actually doing the what if everything went wrong, and that series was quite a fun journey, but I'm actually going to put a quick halt to it for a short period of time before we actually move on to what if everything actually went wrong during Naruto Shippuden. But in this case I wanted to take a break, do something a bit different here, and I thought, you know what, it's been a while since I last did the in defensive series, so I figure this is going to be fun. And I figured since we already talked about Sakura, which I highly recommend you guys actually watch those videos, it's definitely going to be quite an eye-opener for you guys, because with Sakura, defending her was actually not that difficult, because the thing is this, she actually contributed a lot to the story, so there was actually a lot to talk about. In fact, I had to split it into 3 different parts just to talk about Sakura and defending everything she's actually done. However, there are 2 particular characters within the series that definitely don't get that same kind of spotlight, and it is quite unfortunate. However, they don't get hated upon as much as they do Sakura for the fact that they simply are just not main characters, and as a result, they don't get as much hate. However, that doesn't excuse them entirely. They do still actually get some form of hate in some sort of way. And I figured these 2 particular characters, I'm going to defend both of them in this one video. So if you guys have already figured it out by now by the title itself of the video, I'm going to be defending both Ino and Tenten. Both characters are female characters in the series, and we have to admit that Kishimoto was not great at writing female characters. We know that it's not his forte, so as a result, you can't really expect too much when it comes to female characters in Naruto in general, especially when it comes to characters like Ino and Tenten. Now, given that these 2 characters are side characters, they didn't get introduced until later on in the Chunin exams. Now, we already did know that Ino was early on a rival to Sakura, so it is something that they kind of already set up. We were kind of expecting something. It's just a shame that it didn't pan out the way we thought it would. And as for Tenten, she had to be introduced during the Chunin exams arc, which was a bit later on in the series. Now, of course, both of them didn't really have too much in their introductions, because with Ino, she was pretty much similar to Sakura and every other girl at the academy. She was pretty much just interested in Sasuke, and that was just something that was, you just can't really get away from it. It's quite typical, it's quite common, and that's kind of like the first offense. Every kind of girl would be interested in the most talented guy in the class, and also the best looking. Sasuke is an Uchiha, he doesn't really have to do anything about it. Being an Uchiha means you have all those good looks, and it also means you're naturally talented as well. So with that being said, it's no surprise that every girl in the academy was actually interested in Sasuke, including Ino. In fact, the weird thing is, even in the Chunin exams, when Tenten first met Sasuke, she was already thinking he's a cute guy, so it's really interesting to see that no matter what, Uchiha really does have the greatest genes in Naruto. So of course, we kick off with the exam itself, where now we do know that Tenten is actually 1 year above Ino, so in this case she kind of has that bit of advantage here. She has a bit more experience, she's been out on more missions, so as a result we do know that she is technically going to be more stronger in this particular situation, and given that she's a mid to long range fighter, she might actually do pretty well against Ino in a fight. However, we are not actually trying to compare them in that way, we are trying to actually defend them. So with that being said, in the Chunin exams, Ino did actually have quite a few impressive feats, for the fact that in the written exams itself, she did actually manage to cheat by actually utilizing Sakura, and that is definitely quite nice, for the fact that she knows that Sakura is someone who is actually smart, so she takes advantage of that and uses her mind transfer jutsu on Sakura, and then actually uses it to cheat on the exam itself. So that's definitely quite impressive. As for Tenten, she was also quite innovative when it came to cheating as well, because in the Chunin exams, she was actually able to use somehow a mirror and reflect it by using somewhat of a puppetry kind of technique, where she's just using basic wires where they're kind of invisible if you're actually looking from a distance, and she uses it to actually reflect on someone else's answers and cheat on that. So it's definitely quite impressive, and she also manages to help Lee in the exam as well. Now, of course, both characters manage to pass, of course, and we move on to the second stage of the exams, where we have both Ino and Tenten kind of doing their own thing. They both manage to actually get through all of this. Now, with Ino, she does actually have to be in a team fight with Choji and Shikamaru, but you could also argue the same for Shikamaru and Choji as well. Both of them can't really function too well individually, and we see that quite a bit even in Shikamaru, where he just runs out of chakra. He needs the support of Choji and Ino as well. It's the combo that makes them great. It's the combo that actually makes them strong. So with Ino's case, I wouldn't actually be complaining for the fact that she's actually weak in this situation. She actually does pretty well in their whole Ino Shikacho combo. As for Tenten, she actually probably does have her individual skills. She is part of Team Guy, which definitely raises expectations for her that she has to live up to, and it's going to be quite difficult, but during the second stage of the exams, she didn't come out as injured, and it seems like their team actually did well. Now, you could argue that both Lee and Neji might have carried the team, and yes, while that might be possible, you have to keep in mind that Tenten would probably also contribute in some sort of way, and as a result, I'm going to give her a bit of props for that. So we move on to the third stage of the exams. We're actually going through this pretty quickly. Now, unfortunately, we have the fight against Tenten and Tamari, and wow, did that actually go pretty awful. The unfortunate thing with that particular fight was that it was the worst case scenario for Tenten, taking on someone like Tamari, who was incredibly strong. There was just something that was not right with that particular fight. I mean, Tenten was getting completely shafted in that fight. Had Tenten maybe gone up against Ino or Sakura, she would have definitely won, for sure. I mean, as a long-range fighter or mid-range fighter, she could definitely handle someone like Sakura or Ino. But in this case, she did take on a pretty strong opponent, and as a result, she ended up losing. She is part of a team that specializes in taijutsu, so it's really difficult to obviously go up against someone who pretty much just blows away everything you throw at them. As for Sakura and Ino's fight, it's a similar case. Both of them were technically the weakest in that particular situation or that particular participating round. Now, something that did kind of come off as a bit disappointing for Ino in that situation was the fact that she actually lost to Sakura. A lot of people were actually assuming that Ino would actually win in this situation, where Sakura wouldn't be able to break out of the mind transfer jutsu. However, for some reason, Sakura did manage to go out, which means that Ino's mind transfer was not strong enough. She didn't have a strong enough psyche to actually lock Sakura in, and for someone to actually break out of the Yamanaka clan's mind transfer jutsu, either that person is particularly strong when it comes to mind related jutsu, or the actual caster itself is actually weak. And I think it's kind of both. Sakura was already someone who had an aptitude in genjutsu, and Ino was technically a genin at that time, so she didn't really have too much of control over the opponent as well as her father did. So with her actually getting into that double knockout with Sakura, again, it's not too bad of a situation. But of course, the sad thing is, for the rest of this point onwards, both characters didn't actually contribute in any way whatsoever, which is definitely quite unfortunate. But to be honest, you could also say the same about Sakura and Hinata as well. In fact, the only female character that actually really did something was Tamari. I mean, even Kurenai didn't really get too much out of it, but we'll talk about that in a separate video. But basically, for the rest of Naruto, the OG series that is, Ino and Tenten had no contributions at all, and it's quite unfortunate. Yeah, they might have been in some missions in the fillers, but as an overall in the main series itself, they didn't do anything. And you can't really blame them for that. It's Kishimoto for not including or not being inclusive with all of his characters that he's actually designed. However, we now move on to Shippuden. Shippuden shouldn't take too long as well, because at the very beginning, we have Tenten actually being introduced. We actually thought that something was actually going to happen. Unfortunately, nothing really happened. She contributed in Guy's team actually going to take off the tags so that they could actually go in and infiltrate and take on Sasori and Deidara. But in that case, they were actually held back. Now she did actually manage to take on her doppelganger and actually beat it, so as a result that is something I can give props to. It's kind of like a surpassing moment of herself. But here's another thing, just prior to that, when Team Guy actually took on Kisame was at 30% of his strength, and the funny thing is Team Guy actually struggled that much against him. Now one thing I won't necessarily blame on Tenten is the fact that even Neji and Lee actually got caught in the water prison jutsu, so I'm not going to blame Tenten for that. I'm not going to condemn her for anything that she lacks in this particular moment. However, with that being said, she did not last as long as both Lee and Neji in this particular situation. Apparently the water prison jutsu actually requires you to hold your breath, because they actually put you in a water prison where you actually can't breathe, which is quite scary. So the sad thing is that in that particular situation, Neji kind of had to break out of it to actually save them, and then Lee had to also break out Tenten in that case because she couldn't handle it. She was reaching her limit. And it's quite sad really, because you could already see that her lacking is her actual stamina itself. She doesn't last as long as both Neji and Lee. Both Neji and Lee easily are far superior than her in terms of physical training, and as a result, they are both significantly stronger as well. To be honest, both Neji and Lee are technically considered geniuses, and unfortunately, Tenten couldn't really do much in that particular situation. And that's pretty much it for that arc. Now of course, we're gonna move on straight ahead into the Hidan and Kakuzu arc, where we actually have Ino. So Ino is actually part of a different team than Team Asuma, who was actually going to hunt out the Akatsuki. She was actually part of Raito and Alba's team, with Choji of course, where they were actually searching as well, but they unfortunately arrived to Asuma's team a bit too late, and unfortunately her medical ninjutsu was not enough to actually save Asuma, so that's quite unfortunate. But the good thing we have to give props for is the fact that Ino actually now knows medical ninjutsu, because at the end of the original series, Ino did actually go seek out Sakura and wanted to also get into medical ninjutsu. However, there is definitely quite a disparity in their actual abilities. Sakura managed to actually become quite a top-notch medical ninja, even coming close to Tsunade's actual abilities, even surpassing Shizune's medical ninjutsu as well. Unfortunately for Ino, she was just the ordinary medical ninja, so that is definitely quite unfortunate. And the other thing is that, yeah, technically Sakura did kind of have a head start in front of Ino, but still the progression with Sakura was definitely far greater than Ino's. But I'm not going to necessarily blame Ino for that. Ino was already someone who's considered strong enough with her secret jutsu passed down from her clan, whereas Sakura had to have something given to her to make her special in some sort of way. And when it came to saving Asuma, to be honest, I doubt anyone would actually be able to save Asuma in that case. Even Tsunade wouldn't be able to. He had 4 vital spots, so with Ino trying to actually save him, it was not going to work anyway, so I don't blame her for that. But of course, we move on to the point where now Team 10 wants to get revenge on Hidan and Kakuzu of course, and with that being said, they actually go head out and have their own plan, they have their own missions, but unfortunately in that situation, both Ino and Choji were actually kind of dead weight in that situation, so I'm actually going to have to say strike one on this particular case. Because when you actually look at it, both Ino and Choji pretty much were caught up in every single attack. You didn't even need them there. If anything, having just Shikamaru and having just Kakashi would have actually been enough to hold off Kakuzu and Hidan up until the point where we actually have Team Naruto actually coming in. Ino and Choji actually did quite awful things. Of course, I'm going to talk about Choji maybe in a different video. Maybe he doesn't need as much defending, but with Ino's case, she really did not contribute in any way whatsoever in that fight. She didn't really get to use her medical ninjutsu to really heal Kakashi, because Kakashi kind of had to stay active in that particular fight. Ino was also just caught up in Kakuzu's jutsu, relying on Shikamaru to actually get her out, so yeah, it's really hard to defend her. it's kind of a strike one in that case. The best I can do to defend her in that situation is the fact that at least even Choji was also dead weight in that situation, so it's not entirely Ino. And also that arc was mainly focusing on Shikamaru as well. It was technically Shikamaru Shippuden, so I'm not gonna blame Ino for that as well. Now let's move on just a bit ahead to where she's actually relevant again, and in this case she was kind of relevant in the pain arc. Of course, she didn't necessarily do too much for the fact that she wasn't really doing anything, because to be honest, she was really just running up to tell her dad about the news. She didn't really contribute too much in anything else. I mean, her dad was gonna find out anyway, the intel core was gonna find out anyway, and her being there to actually fight in that situation was kind of pointless. I mean, you guys are actually complaining about Sakura not fighting, but she was a top-notch medical ninja. She was actually going to help people out, and she was keeping the hospital organized. She did her duty. With Ino's case, it would have actually been better had she actually gone to the hospital and helped everyone out instead of join the entire intel team and then just do nothing really. So it is definitely quite unfortunate, because her being a medical ninja, it would have made more sense for her to actually be at the hospital with Sakura actually tending to the wounded. So she kind of lost credit in that particular scenario. She couldn't really save Shizune from dying as well, and overall she wasn't even in any major fights. So unfortunately she was kind of outshined by Sakura in that particular scenario. And dare I say, this might be strike 2 as well. But of course, just moving ahead, Sasuke has just kidnapped the Eight Tails, and as a result, he is now branded as a true criminal by the Raikage. In that situation, there was a particular scene that Ino was actually starting to cry in that situation. We can clearly see that Ino still has feelings for Sasuke, so that is definitely quite a problem. A lot of people were also kind of complaining at the fact that Ino was kind of, I don't really want to say the word, but she was a bit too easy. She was letting guys in a bit too easy in that particular situation. I mean, she was already kind of interested in Sasuke. I mean, enough to the point where she cried at the fact that they're gonna declare that Sasuke is a rogue ninja, officially a criminal, and that they're gonna hunt him down. But also the fact that she also was partially interested in Sai. So that definitely does make it seem like she's a... starts with an S, but I don't want to say it. Now unfortunately I can't defend that in any kind of way. Ino's major weakness is the fact that she does fall for a lot of the pretty boys, and I use that with the quotation marks, and because of that reason it kind of does weaken her resolve in any kind of fight whatsoever. However, what I will give props to in this particular scenario is that while Naruto actually wants to keep Sasuke safe in this situation, Tenten was actually quite adamant about agreeing with Sasuke being the criminal here, and she was actually one of the people who disagreed with letting Sasuke live. She was actually arguing with Naruto, or at least going up against him, because Naruto wanted everyone to let him handle Sasuke. So it's good to know that Tenten isn't so focused on just men like Ino was. And from this point on, we're actually just going to skip ahead all the way to the war, because that's when they're actually next most significant in this particular portion. So far we haven't seen too much actually happening with Tenten, so we can't really blame her for anything because she was just not being included by Kishimoto. With Ino's case, while she was included, a lot of moments actually did drag her down quite a bit. Now during the war arc itself, there were only 2 or 3 particular moments where Ino was relevant, and there was only really 1 moment where Tenten was relevant. For Tenten's case, the way she was actually relevant was the time when Kinkaku and Ginkaku actually came out, and they actually brought out those ninja tools from the Sage of Six Paths, and that actually gave Tenten some kind of small opportunity to actually wield those weapons, which is definitely great for the fact that she was a weapons user. But the problem was, she actually lacked the chakra to wield those particular weapons. But I am going to give her props for the fact that she was actually capable of wielding those weapons. I can only guess that those particular weapons are not as easy to wield by anyone, and you got to keep in mind that while Daru was actually able to wield one of those weapons as well, he was already a top Jonin, considered the right-hand man of the Raikage. So considering that Tenten was actually able to use one of the weapons as her own as well, it's definitely quite impressive. But from the rest of the war onwards, Tenten unfortunately did not have any major contributions, so that is definitely quite a disappointment from there. As for Ino's case, when Asuma was actually arriving, Ino did manage to break her resolve and actually finish the job and take down Asuma. Now of course the difficult thing about this is the fact that Ino was technically using a mind transfer jutsu. The one to actually do the finishing blow was Choji, which made it a lot more difficult. But of course the resolve to fight off Asuma was definitely necessary, and I felt that Ino had the weakest heart out of all of them, so the fact that Ino was actually resolved to fight Asuma was definitely something that I could give her credit for. However, one big major moment that actually did happen for Ino was later on in the war. Once Inoichi actually died, once headquarters actually died, Ino did actually contribute quite a lot in this particular fact. Ino was actually able to transmit everything that Shikamaru had in plan to every other shinobi on the battlefield. Now you might think it's a lot of shinobi because in the war there was 80,000 different shinobi who actually participated. However, we do know that in the first day 40,000 did die, and on the second day a lot of other shinobi had already died as well, including the ones from HQ. So with that being said, I would have to say that at least another half died in that case as well. Of course it's only my own assumption, maybe more died as well, and as a result there's less shinobi, but yet just keep in mind that we're looking in the thousands here, where Ino actually is technically transmitting all this information. So it's quite impressive for the fact that she's only a Chunin as well. She's obviously not close to surpassing Inoichi, which is definitely unfortunate, but it is something I can give her props for. However, with that being said, that pretty much concludes both Ino and Tenten's characters in this particular series. You could see that they definitely had very little involvement in anything whatsoever, so a lot of people were definitely disappointed in that particular fact, that they technically had that branding of useless. But you can't really blame them, because as an overall, when you look at it, Kishimoto was just poorly writing them out. He wasn't being inclusive. They didn't really have any kind of major point in the series where they contributed. With Tenten, she really just had no major moments whatsoever. With Ino's case, while she had some moments that were really negative, she also had some moments that were also really positive as well. So what did you guys think about this? Did I actually miss out anything? If you enjoyed this video, drop a like and also share this video, it helps so much. And don't forget to subscribe for more videos just like this. As a final thing, I will say that both of them did turn out pretty nicely in Boruto. But of course, I hope you all have a wonderful day. This is Enigma, signing out.